Hiring the wrong closer won't just hurt your numbers. It could cost you a ton in missed revenue, in opportunity cost. And the worst part is that most business owners have no idea it's even happening in the first place. So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down the real opportunity cost of keeping the wrong sales rep on your team. And I'll also give you tangible signs to look out for to basically decide whether you should retrain them or just get rid of them and hire a brand new rep. Because look, the cost isn't just salary, commissions, and ad spend. It's opportunity cost in missed revenue. So in order for me to explain this, let's hop right into the iPad. Since you guys know I'm a numbers guy, let's just break this down. So at any given month, let's just say for an example, we are getting 100 live inbound calls. Now this is not applying for the show up rate. This is just saying specifically, we're gonna get 100 live inbound calls. So let's just write down here 100, excuse my handwriting, live calls. Okay, so out of that 100 live calls, we have two closers in this specific example. The first closer, we're just gonna call closer A. Closer A is going to be sitting at a 30% close rate. And closer B is going to be the bad closer, is going to be sitting at a 10% close rate. So out of these 100 live calls, we can see that closer A will get 30 deals and closer B will get 10 deals, right? And let's just say for an example, the offer, which we'll just label here as O, the offer is $5,000. So closer A, out of those 30 deals, he or she would bring in 150K in revenue, and at 10 deals, specifically closer B is actually only going to bring in $50,000, right? In revenue. Now, again, we can see here that the delta between the two, between the 100 and 150,000 is actually $100,000 in missed revenue. That is the opportunity cost that you could be paying in this example for just having a slacker on the team. And over a period of a year, I mean that 100,000 adds up to 1.2 million. Just by having a bad closer on the team. Now, trust me, I have been there before, and the reason I'm making this video is basically, I wish I saw this video years and years and years ago, because I understand, talking to founders, I get it. I was in that situation before, where for an example, when I was running a sales team of 5 people, I knew there was a straggler on the team. However, 4 years ago, I did not know where to find great closers, how to vet them, how to basically interview them, how to extract the real value to make sure that they are actually a real closer. And I'm not just being, smokescreened on a call by a very good closer, right? Or pretendee of a closer. However, we are at this day and age where there are companies like SalesMatch that can provide you with a full pipeline of, sales reps ready to go, right? However, I do understand, going back to my story where, I had a slacker on the team. I didn't want to replace them. Why? Because I was okay with them being at a 10% close rate when the majority of my closers were 20 to 30%. Why? Because I did not want to go through the effort of finding them, training them, and so on and so forth. However, it wasn't until I did this math, until I figured out, wow, we are losing a ton of deals on a yearly basis, right? And it is basically hindering us from scaling, because the easiest fix is to take somebody, basically the easiest fix in revenue is to take somebody that is at a 10% close rate. If you bump them to a 20% close rate, right? In this specific example, if we just took closer B and bumped him to a 20% close rate, well, guess what? He would be doing an extra $50,000 a month in revenue, and over a period of a year, that comes out to $600,000, which is a lot of money in this example, right? So again, we have to look at the downstream damage that bad reps cause, right? Because at the end of the day, they don't just, fail to close. What they are doing is burning your lead specifically, right? Because if you think of it, if a lead has talked to your closing team, right, and they've already come in, they've already watched your ad, they've already talked to your setter, they've already talked to your closer, and they weren't impressed with what they saw or how the closer kind of talked to them, well, you just burnt that lead pretty much forever. And the reason I'm saying pretty much is because we've actually tested this before, where we've had, a lead had a bad interaction with a closer, and what I did as a founder is I just paired that lead up with another closer a couple weeks later to re-engage those leads. And And what happened, a small percentage of those leads actually did convert. However, the majority of those leads were actually burned because they had that bad experience, right? So it's super important that, as a founder, especially in this day and age with rising ad costs that everybody knows is becoming more and more expensive to basically acquire a customer, it is so important in this day and age that we work every single lead that you have to the bone. I preach this over and over and over again. It's not really about volume, right? It's about efficiency. Because if you can extract more of the leads you're currently getting and convert more of the leads you currently have into closes, well, guess what? Your customer acquisition cost is going to be lowered without spending more on ads. It's just increasing the efficiency of your funnel. But anyway, I digress. The other thing that bad reps actually do as well is damage your brand. So hand in hand with burning your leads, they can actually damage your brand, right? Because if your bad closer is not saying the right things, or they misrepresent anything that you are offering, that could hurt and damage your brand in the long term, right? Which is not good. Now, the third thing that we need to take into account here is wasting your marketing budget, right? Obviously, we pay for leads as founders, right? A lot of times closers, especially mediocre and bad closers, they kind of just want to play the volume game, and they don't understand that leads actually cost real money, and that it can cost anywhere from, $120 all the way up to, $450 a call, right? And sometimes even more than that for higher ticket offers, right? However, we have to make closers realize and tell them how much we are paying for leads, right? And you can do this at your discretionary. They don't really need to know how much you're paying for leads. They just need to know that every single lead, they need to work to the bone, right? Because otherwise, they are going to be wasting your ad budget. Now, the next thing that they actually do, that bad reps do, is drain your pipeline health, right? And what do I mean by this specifically? It's actually the morale of the team, right? If you have a big pipeline that you're working and, closer A goes in and actually crushes it, and closer B is just playing the volume game and doesn't work every lead to the bone, well, guess what? They're going to be draining your pipeline health in terms of the volume of leads that you have. Because if you have closer A, if you think of a funnel, right? And you have closer A at the bottom siphoning those leads and are doing really well, and you have closer B that comes in and is also taking from the same funnel, right, but is wasting leads, well, they're going to be draining your pipeline health. Because guess what? That closer B, all those leads that are going to him should have gone to closer A in the first place, so that you can maximize the efficiency of your pipeline. And the last thing that bad reps do here in this example is lower the morale among setters and closers. There is no faster way, and you guys have heard me say this over and over again, there's no faster way to drain your team's morale than to basically keep up and deal with low performers or underperformers on your team. Because what's going to happen to your team's morale and culture is you're going to turn it into a culture of mediocrity is okay. And you never want that as a founder or anybody, right? On any position, on any team. That is not okay. Business, the way I look at business, is like a team, right? So when you are going out there and you're building your team, right, you have to raise the bar. Whenever you are hiring, you have to hire somebody that's better than anybody right now on your team. If you don't do that, you're going to start slacking, right? And your team is slowly over time progressively going to get worse. Because why? You're not raising the bar, right? You always have to raise the bar when you are making new hires. So again, bad reps don't just cost you money, right? They create drag on your entire company, from, the appointment setters all the way through to fulfillment. Because again, if they do not sell and represent your brand the way that you wanted them to represent your brand, then at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of headaches on the fulfillment side of things if everything was not aligned on the initial sales call. Okay, now, why do some founders, keep the wrong reps around for too long? And I have been guilty of this, so I completely understand, right? But some of the things I've heard when talking to founders is, they just need more time to ramp up, right? But if they have gone 6 months, right, and they're still not up on KPI, in my opinion, everything after 90 to 120 days, if they're not ramped up into KPI, you got to get rid of them and you got to replace them. 90 days is actually the cutoff. I don't even know why I said 120 days. It's 90 days is the cutoff. If they are not in KPI within 90 days, you got to get rid of them. Okay. Now, the next thing I heard, and I'm guilty for this, is, they're a good person, right? I've had a closer myself that I knew I had to cut years ago. However, that closer was they were a family man. They brought great team culture, right? And they were just a team player. However, they could not keep up to KPI, so eventually I had to get rid of him, right? However, keeping a good person around is not only hurting you, right, and your business, it's hurting the entire team, right? Because again, a team structure is where everybody brings their part, right? If there's a slacker on the team, well, guess what? You got to get rid of them in the sake of the team. It's your duty as the founder, as the sales manager, to get rid of the slackers on the team. Now, the third most common reason I see founders basically keep the wrong reps for too long is that they just want to they basically want to see how they perform over the next few months, right? But what they fail to understand is that if they've been there for 120 days plus or even 6 months, they're not going to do anything better than the month before unless you actively re-engage the training modules with them and do active kind of call reviews with them and then ramp them up. However, they need to be coachable in order for you to do that. If the rep is not coachable, guess what? You are basically training a dead horse. You have to move on to basically getting them out of your team and replacing them with a new closer. Now again, you cannot afford to hope your rep figures it out. That is not leadership. That is literally gambling with your entire business. Now, let's look at the opposite here and actually ask ourselves, well, what does a great closer actually bring to the team or bring to the table, right? Well, let's have a look at that, right? Now, great closers are going to be consistently closing over 25%, right? And this obviously varies greatly offer by offer. However, that is more or less kind of the medium that we can call it, right? Because again, if you have an offer that is $2,500 versus an offer that's $50,000, well, there is going to be a difference in the close rate. So it's very hard for me to sit here and say there's an average consistent close rate across the board. However, if I had a gun to my head, it is pretty much over 25% across the board, okay? Now, the next thing that we can look at here, what makes a great closer, is they are actually capable of having and self-managing a pipeline, right? I cannot tell you how frustrating it is when you have a closer that is not technology inclined, right? That doesn't know how to use a CRM, that doesn't know how to use PandaDocs, DocuSign, and so on and so forth if you're using any of the softwares like Slack, right? It is extremely frustrating, right? Because at the end of the day, what you will find yourself is that, and I'm speaking from firsthand experience, I've had a closer that was an extremely good closer. However, the tech stack familiarity was incredibly bad, right? And what happens is, yes, they're a great closer, but guess what? You're going to be spending so much time with them, trying to send out contracts, trying to teach them how to use the CRM. And that in turn is sucking the lifeblood out of your business, because you need to be spending your time as a founder or a sales manager, if you're watching this, on growing and scaling the business, not babysitting damn leads, right? So it's super, super important that a great closer can have a self-managed pipeline. The other thing is that a great closer, right, should be onboarding themselves pretty darn quickly, right? Because at the end of the day, if they cannot onboard themselves really quickly, again, there's going to be opportunity cost involved, right? And I get, a lot of questions sometimes like, Craig, how do I onboard a great closer? Well, the good thing is a great closer has already have experience, right? Especially when we recruit for businesses, we go find closers and setters that have already been in high ticket sales. They are super familiar with, all the tech stack familiarities. They are familiar with the price points. They are familiar with the lead flow, where leads are coming from, right? So it's super important that when you onboard a great closer, in my opinion, all that you have to do is train them on, number one, the flow of the lead from where they are responsible, right? When they first initially engage with the lead to the handoff process where they hand it off either to fulfillment or customer success, right? What does that entire kind of timeline look like? And then in combination with that, walking them through your tech stack, and then finally just providing them with a bunch of your top closers calls, right? Give them your top closers calls and just have them study those calls, and then throw them in the fire, right? Let them swim, right? Not swim in fire, but you get what I'm trying to say here. Now, the next thing moving on here that makes a great closer is creative objection handling, right? Nothing is worse than having a rep, right? My one saying that I absolutely hate, that if anybody closes for me, they will never say this, right? If you ask somebody, oh, how's your morning been? Let's just say the closer's name is Bob, right? Oh, can't complain. It's such a fantastic day, right? I cannot tell you how salesy that is. And, if you're watching this and you've heard that, comment down below and tell me your story as well. But hearing this is super, super frustrating because again, it's a fake facade, right? You're not being genuine, you're not being authentic. So when I'm writing down here in terms of, creative objection handling, what I mean by that is that you can think outside the box. You're not just using the templates that everybody provides. You can basically take a framework and make it your own, right? Which is so important. Now, the next thing that makes a great closer is confidence on every call, right? This goes without saying that a closer needs to be confident, right? However, there's a fine line between confidence and ego, right? And a lot of the top reps, right, we can see this, and I have seen this plenty and plenty of times over and over again, is that top reps can be egotistical, which is not good, right? So there's a fine line between egotistical, or being egotistical, and being confident, right? And we are looking for confident reps, not egotistical reps, because at the end of the day, they're going to be representing your brand, right? And whatever you put your closer, or whichever closer you put on the front lines to talk with your potential customers in the future, they are representing your brand, right? It's super, super important. Now, the final thing that makes a great closer is pressure tested performance, right? We have to put them through mock calls. We have to look at their past performance, right? We have to look at their past calls, right? And put them through pressure tests, right? On your specific offer. So after all of the training has been done, after they've reviewed all the calls, after they've gone through the tech stack, after they've gone through everything else that you've provided them with for training, you have to put them through pressure tested environments, right? By doing mock calls, right? Drilling them on their everything, right? Objection handling. And an easy way to do this is just to take all of your sales calls that you currently have, right? And basically take the transcript, slap it into ChatGPT or any of these AI models, right? And ask them to present you with your top objections, right? Take those top objections and throw them at your new closer, okay? Now, this is exactly what we do here at Sales Match, right? You're not just replacing a bad rep. If you do replace a bad rep, right, what you're doing is unlocking scale, potentially more revenue, and definitely peace of mind, right? Now, the biggest threat to your business isn't no sales at all. It's the illusion of sales, right? And it's keeping somebody who's underperforming and hoping they improve. So if you're tired and you're sitting there watching this and you know specifically there is a rep that you want to replace and have to replace, however, you do not want to go through the constant grind of finding a new rep, vetting them, doing 50 plus interviews to find the perfect rep for your offer, we can do all of that for you here at Sales Match, and we can present you with the top cream of the crop candidates that we do find. So if that interests you, click the link below, book a free consultation call, and if you would just want some more information, let's just have a chat. Well, I hope to see you in the next video, and I hope this video helped you. Bye-bye.